but we'll have more for your next meeting.
Okay.
I don't think, and I've followed it loosely, and I'll send you a document that just came out 2 weeks ago from the state on it as well that I've seen. I haven't read it all. But generally it's, I think it's more directional to say if they start testing on a frequency and this is the baseline, okay, you're trending up or you're trending down, it's not going to, as I understand it, it doesn't give you an idea of what percentage of the population may be positive or, you know, estimated counts. It's more of just, is the overall population trending up or down?
Right.
Or stable?
Yeah.
I think it's more trend directional, I think, than anything else.
Yeah, I thought it was interesting. There was a section talking about how testing is happening more at home, and so when one person tests at home, the odds are that the rest of the family are not testing. They're waiting for it to, if they do have it, they're just waiting out that period of time and maybe testing at the end of that. So that can skew what we're seeing as well. So.
I've heard the same thing. That's interesting you say that, but I've heard the same thing from people where one has it and the rest are going through the 5-day or something, and then they'll test at the end of the 5, not in the first 4.
Right.
So, not surprising. I believe there's some talk about an upcoming vax clinic, potentially, as well, right?
So in your packets, there was a list of upcoming vaccination sites in August.
Yep.
We're looking at scheduling one of those dates here in Erving. It's looking like August 25th. We're just waiting on a few more confirmations, and then we'll get that information out to the public.
Yep, so that'll be soon to come. Okay, next topic, review of the town bylaw codification project and editorial analysis. Mr. Newton, would you like to join us? So last meeting, I believe we said we'd go basically the first section before planning there and go through it and note any that we had any kind of questions or comments on to discuss. Bill, it sounded like you had a couple notes, if you wanted to start.
I did, and section, well, I don't know what section it is. Wait a minute, let me look. I have adopt section 1, 2B. I haven't gotten to my notifications yet.
I guess I didn't hear that, Bill. What was the question number?
It was section 1, 2B, C, and it was zoning for enforcement officers, etc.
Section 1, 2. Is that on the non-criminal disposition that we're looking at?
I'm not sure because I'm pretty sure it was where I first started, and so I'm looking for it and I don't actually see it. The issue I had was on question C, well, not question C. Above that I have first violation for enforcing persons, 1-2C.
think it's in the example of the penalty section. Looks like
I'm not sure where it's at. It's not
section page 7 in the what's the right word? Can you even think? Right before the official list of questions with the suggested edits.
Yes,
Here's
Right,
the
okay,
preface.
so that's
yeah.
So if you look
Preface?
at page
It's in the preface?
VII,
It's in the
right?
preface.
That's what it is,
Oh,
page
page
VII? right?
VII.
Yeah, okay.
And I guess one question was, it listed first violation at $50, second violation at 100, and third violation at 3. So one of my first question is that what we're deciding we want to see as for fine violation for those, for enforcing persons? The ability to non-criminally issue citations for those amounts?
Right, so my understanding of the reason for doing this is going down one path, if you go down the non-criminal violation path, that does not preclude going down the criminal violation path
Right.
at a later date if you need to.
Right.
So it's just another tool, and most people, most of the things, I think, would be considered better off non-criminal, like, if you don't clean your sidewalk in a timely manner and
Right.
things like that, trying to make it not as harsh of a situation.
Okay.
That was the thinking that I had behind it.
Right, right.
And I'm pretty sure that was the thinking that the general code was looking at as well.
Okay. And then I had noted C under that same chapter and section, and it said, it listed those individuals who would have the enforcement ability and authority to do non-criminal / criminal citations. And it had listed the town administrator as being one. And my question is town administrator appropriate for that authority?
Right, I don't think so, and that was, if you look in that little box that was on that page,
Okay.
the print was kind of small, but we had made a couple of modifications as to who could issue citations, and we did delete,
Yep.
Oh, okay.
town administrator.
Okay.
And what we did do is like for, water commissioners
Right.
and director of public works or whatever, we said, or their agent,
Okay.
okay, which, is a very common type of nomenclature, it's not, you don't need to have Glenn out there,
Right.
or if it's a
Right.
board, the whole
Right.
board doesn't have to
Right.
meet, you can, as you've done many times, you appoint somebody to do
Right,
those
right.
things. Yep.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Another change that was made down there is that when you look at section B, it says each day. And I believe we changed that to say each calendar day, so that we don't need to keep track of a clock that says, well, the citation was issued at 10 o'clock, so we can't issue the next one until 10 o'clock the next day. So
Right.
something like that. So to simplify it, we said calendar day,
Right.
trying to make sense there. I
Can
think
just
those were the
offer
two biggest
one more
changes.
clarification.
I'm sorry?
Can I offer clarification?
Sure.
This section is not an existing bylaw.
Right.
This is a recommendation, and it's, for anybody who's reviewing this document separately from this meeting, the recommendation from the general code vendor is that you consider adopting an enforcement section,
Right.
and then all other bylaws that have an enforcement article would point back to this, so it would have the same application, which is why you have such an inclusive enforcement section.
Yep.
The alternative is every bylaw that has an enforcement section could just have a structure embedded within it. So this is like a either or approach.
Okay.
So if you decide to do this as we hit the other bylaws that have an enforcement section, we would want to consider whether or not you want to point that section back to this.
Okay,
You wouldn't want it to be duplicitous, because then we potentially are going to have confusion between how
Right.
each bylaw is going to be enforced.
Right.
And that's why it seems so inclusive.
okay.
But in others, we could have a different
You give a different structure,
structure specific to that
if it made sense.
bylaw. Yeah, okay.
What they're trying to point you to, and that's why they listed that topic as critical, is the fact that the town's people took a vote to adopt the ability to do non-criminal disposition tickets was not in and of itself a local option adoption. Like, just the fact that you took the vote doesn't mean that it's now in place. We actually have to put the structure to it within the bylaws.
Right.
And some of our bylaws do not have that section
Right.
clear enough.
Oh, that's been a town problem, and probably a lot of communities have that exact same problem.
Absolutely.
They have no enforcement structure to the bylaws.
Exactly.
And,
Yep.
Okay.
I did notice we put that revised is ours, right? That's work that we did, right? That you
Yes,
and the group-
in
yeah,
that
yeah.
little box.
In the
is
revised,
work that
yeah.
we did, yes, in conversations with other folks in town council and everything, yep.
I know they're going to go through and do it anyway, but Board of Selectmen versus Select Board, probably just want to change that just to.
Right.
I don't want them to take that and then forget to check through the stuff we provided.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes, this was done
Just a
prior to
small-
that change, yeah.
Yep, yep.
Yep.
Public Works as a catch-all for water, wastewater, and highway. Is that the? I'm sorry, wastewater and highway. Is that the? Because I noticed we said director of, which we don't have that position, which is not
Right.
necessarily an issue, but called out of water commissioners, but we don't.
Okay,
We probably want to put highway superintendent.
I was thinking, chief wastewater operator and highway superintendent separately, right?
Yeah.
Rather than the director of public works,
Right.
because those are the two groups that's meant to convey.
Right.
We don't have that as a single role
Right.
right now.
Right. Yeah, agreed.
so Director of Public Works to Chief Water Operator.
Chief wastewater operator, because water commissioners would.
No, it's got water superintendent in there, so wastewater superintendent. We just make that water and wastewater superintendent.
Am I misreading that?
Yeah, it's 4 lines down. Code enforcement officer, water superintendent.
Are you looking at the revised? Because the revised does not have that.
Oh,
Yeah,
no, sorry.
In that little box.
Because it has water
it's
commissioners.
Then
very
we'll
tiny.
add that in there.
Well, it has water commissioners, so the chief water operator would be the agent of the water commissioners.
True.
So we don't need
You don't have to restate it.
the chief water operator.
Right, right,
We
right.
need the chief wastewater, right?
Yep.
And highway superintendent. Yep. Are there any groups missing? I think that covers it. At least relative to the example. Any concerns now, Bill, with what's there in the revised?
No.
Okay.
My next question was on question 45-004. And the box that was checked was defer decision till after code publication. So how's, well, before we go there, it talked about chapter and section for appointment of commissioners of the cemetery and whether the moderator has appointing authority for that commission, and we don't have commissioners of the cemetery to begin with, so it's generally
Well,
falls on the
technically
highway.
do,
The three of you are.
we
Well,
are.
right.
So
yeah,
technically
right,
we are.
So we
yeah,
have the town
right,
moderator appoint the three of you,
Right,
and that has been your practice for decades, is my understanding.
okay.
But the question that they're suggesting is that's unusual to have the town
Right.
moderator
Right.
with that role.
Right.
And so the question has been whether or not you wanted to potentially tease the cemetery commission away from or out of the select board, and have the select board do the appointing of that. Or if you want to address this in a different way and officially go to the voters and have them just solidify that the select board can act as the cemetery commission. And there's a whole MGL process for that. So I think that's why we were suggesting a deferred to after it's been codified. Functionally, there's nothing wrong with what you're doing today, but
Okay.
I think it's something that gets lost over time, and it may be something that's worth just clarifying.
So this particular section, we're going to come back to when we're done?
It's an
Well,
option.
can, we could just say, defer a decision until later on, or we can, take a look at it and think about how we really want to do this prior to submitting it to general code, go either way. They're just making a observation and a recommendation, and
Right,
it's up to
right.
us whether we want it or not.
Okay. Yeah. Well, I'm just wondering if that particular section is something that we need to have a larger discussion with the select board in full before making a decision.
I say it doesn't bring up everything in that section, but it also doesn't clarify should there be staggered terms, the 3
Right.
years, all the other
Right.
stuff that we would typically put into a bylaw that talks about the establishment of a board or a
Yep.
commission.
Yep.
So if we were going to make those improvements, we probably should comprehensively look at that bylaw
Yep.
and make all of them at the same time.
Okay.
So, but on that thread, do we want to try to do that before we finalize the code, or do we want to come back to it after? Because that's kind of the question, right? Do we want to spend that
Right.
effort now, and does that delay the code, or do we, well, which we don't, I don't think we want to do. Or do we come back to it as a earmarked for future
Right.
review?
Yeah, I suspect that we don't, if we're in the stage of finalizing this at some point.
That's the
that
whole,
we'd
that's
want-
what this process is.
Would not want to do that at the end, that we'd want to
Right.
cover those issues before it's finished. So that would be my way of tackling that, but.
Well, let's,
So for your next meeting, would you like me to pull together more information on that topic?
yeah, let's do that. And then we'll probably have the whole group here. We can go through that and see if we're ready to come to a decision, make a
Sure.
change. Or if
Yep.
if there's more and we need to defer, we can at that point.
Right. Sometimes you got to flip between the two. I mean, here they're asking the question and they're giving you, their revised, what they might suggest. But if you look back in the actual manuscript, it's a very short thing. And that's why I gave you both of those things, that when you have questions like that. And it just says that the town voted that the moderator appoint 3 members to serve as cemetery commissioners in conjunction with the town treasurer to handle the affairs connected with the cemeteries. That's all that it says, and that's perfectly okay, but they're suggesting that maybe it's a little antiquated,
Yeah.
so,
I actually think we drafted maybe a recommendation for where we could strengthen and clarify the cemetery commission structure. So we may already have a draft of that work ready to go. So I'll dig through those notes from last year.
all right, so we'll revisit that again?
Yep.
Yep. If possible, maybe we could revisit it the next time we gather, to
On the, yeah, on the
Yeah,
15th.
yeah, yeah.
We'll bring it back next,
Okay.
next meeting in 2 weeks.
All
Yep.
right.
I did want to go back, Bill, if you don't mind. So back
Sure,
to
yeah.
page 79009, the Personnel Relations Board.
Personal relationship.
So I get retaining it if we're going to do
Yep.
something to bring it back, but it's been a long time, and even when it was active, it wasn't necessarily very clear
Yeah.
and or right tasked maybe appropriately at the time. So just not to change the language in here necessarily, but just to put that on the list of actions that come out of this, if we're going to leave that in there or not suggest any changes to it, then
For your next meeting, would you like me to bring forward the recommendations on that? So the three of you can have that conversation?
I mean, I can go either way on that, but I think it should happen this year. Whether it happens before we finalize code or not, I don't think is relevant unless we think we're going to change what the
Right.
code is
Right.
around it.
I think there was just questions about making sure that there was alignment between the state statute that creates the Relations Board and the mission that it was being given here in town, to make sure that they stay in alignment with each other. So we can bring forward those recommendations.
Okay.
Again, they were just, questioning that because they didn't see anything about the board on the website.
Yep.
So,
Why I'm questioning it too.
Well,
Just to make sure if we're doing this and we
Right,
are trying to
right.
bring that back at some point, is that the right
Right.
language? Because if we're
Right.
proposing changes,
Right.
if there are any now, maybe the time to do that.
I agree. We've had a number of conversations regarding the personnel committee over the years, and we just haven't, we've been so busy and in between so many different issues that we just haven't gotten to establish it yet. But I think everybody's in favor of that missing link being there, so.
I also am surprised they didn't catch it, but in the manuscript, it refers to the Personnel Relations Board in the opening sentence and the Personnel Relations Review Board in every sentence after that. So which is it?
Should be
Yeah.
consistent.
Just consistency, right? So I guess let's bring that back on the 15th too, just to have a general conversation about, is that the right language based on some of the background that we've already had discussions around.
Okay.
Question 64-001 is Chapter 64 purchasing, and my only question was, I assume, Brian, that you reviewed that. It says, appears to be sufficient as written, and you're our expert on purchasing. And,
I last looked at this several months ago, so let me pull that back up.
That was 64-1. So authority to enter into contracts unless otherwise provided by town meeting, the Board of Selectmen, or the procurement officer designated pursuant to Mass General Laws. Chapter 30B is authorized to enter into any contract for the exercise of the town's corporate powers consistent with applicable provisions of any general or specific law. So basically it's, as I read that, it's authority for us and the board members and the procurement officer, which we designate Brian as the chief procurement officer. So it's very concise, but I think it
Yeah.
Yep,
serves the purpose,
yep,
if you're good with it.
yep, I'm good with that. Yep.
So we'll keep it the way it is, good.
Just wanted to
You don't have any
make sure
concerns?
Brian was,
Okay.
No, that's
he's
fine.
our guru.
Everything
Right.
else is by regulation or state law, so,
Okay.
yep.
7701 on that same page, the next one, the school department. I'm assuming that was some discussion with them or from just reviewing what we do. Is that right, Dick?
Yeah, the chapter, this is, you want to consider the following, yeah. So they were just suggesting some options, and I think that because they, in different places, sometimes it says school committee and sometimes it says elementary school committee, they were just looking for consistency. So I guess I was thinking just call it school committee, because I think sometimes they also cover the tech school discussions and the high school discussions, and though they're not directly involved, I know we have somebody that's appointed to be on those school boards, but they do sometimes talk about that stuff as well.
What about 3, the 5-year contract for school bus transportation? We're deleting that, or recommending to delete that?
Yes. I think that's what that was that they felt that was not something that needed to be in there.
That's not a bylaw. That's why they're recommending that can come out.
That's not a bylaw we have? I don't follow what you mean by that's not a bylaw.
So as you can see, in '09 that was approved, in '14 that was approved. You all did it again in 2019. So every 5 years they do another 5-year contract procurement with the rest of the regional schools. And every 5 years we put that authorization on the town meeting warrant to get the voters' authorization, similar to what you just did for WatchGuard. So the idea that we wouldn't go back to the voters every 5 years to ask for authorization for a
Okay,
5-year.
I see what you're saying.
So those are just contracting authorizations. That's not a bylaw.
It's not really a bylaw.
No, it's not a
right.
bylaw. And I don't think you would want to deprive the voters of the opportunity to have that authorization every 5 years. So yeah, I would agree that that should be removed. And going forward, we're trying to be clear. You can see the one from 2019 didn't show up in here. We're trying to be clear in your town meeting warrants about what is a general bylaw vote that the voters are being asked to consider either adding or amending or deleting, as opposed to a financial article or a contracting article. And I think the earlier warrants just were a list of articles. And so
Yeah.
maybe there was some ambiguity as to what was more of a bylaw versus what was just an authorization.
Chapter 44, section 4, that's referenced there though in the section B. Is that just the chapter and section that allows authorization by the
Let me pull that up real quick for you.
proper body to go beyond 3 years?
That was chapter 40.
Section 4. I believe that's the authorization from the town meeting to go further, right, than 3, if I'm reading that correctly.
Powers to contract. City or town may make contracts for the exercise of its corporate powers on such terms and conditions that are authorized by the town meeting. In a town council, in a town without a town meeting, city council in a city. City or town may not contract for any purpose on any terms or under the conditions of inconsistent with any applicable provisions of any general or special law. So yeah, it just means that the contracting, the exercising of that authority is to the town meeting,
Which allows us to go past 30B, 12B.
which is why we do that, yeah.
Why we use that one instead, okay.
Yep.
Got it. Right. Well, I don't have any concerns then with that one.
So the final analysis is that we're going to,
I have no concerns with that. Do you have
No,
any?
Okay.
Go as
Yeah.
the revised.
okay.
Yep.
Yep. please. So we're in the very next one, the town meeting warrant.
We've actually already replaced this.
It's, so the revised is what we've already done. They just didn't capture it accurately in the manuscript.
I think
is
these
that-
revisions are edits, but you took to town meeting a new article that was adopted
That's right.
that just didn't make it into this because this predated that change. So the
Right.
voters have already revised this.
Okay, that's kind of, so they didn't have it captured because we did it after they
Correct.
started. Okay,
Did
got
it,
it.
right.
So,
It was after COVID.
so we're just striking those
Yeah.
and replacing them with what we've already done.
Right, because you moved the posting location to the new library.
Yep.
Yep. Got it. Maybe it's somewhere else, but just on that same topic, didn't we, was that a change in MGL or adoption required where the quorum is required to begin, but is not required to maintain?
Right, we passed that, again, not too long ago.
Like post to this? Because I don't see, I would expect that to be in the same section, right? In 84,
Yes,
or
but
is it somewhere
I've
different?
I've included that, or I will include all newly passed legislation that
That we don't
that
have?
we
Okay.
don't currently have in here, right?
Okay.
So,
Okay. So you called out the replacements, but we'll have that as an addition that's
Yeah.
not in here, okay?
yes,
Okay.
yes,
Got it,
yep.
got it.
Yeah, so we'll reconcile the new vote that was taken at town meeting with what was in here. Because I'm looking at the votes right now, it's got the 4 votes related to town meetings dating back to 1955. So we'll reconcile the new bylaw and what this changes.
Okay.
Yep.
I have a recommendation on Chapter 105, Section 1, and Chapter 105, Section 2, regarding alcohol beverages, public ways and buildings, and town buildings. And it says, and it's outlined in yellow, fine not exceeding $50. And the options are increased statutory permitted maximum of $300. I'm not in favor of doing that, but I think the fine not exceeding $50 is too small. And
What do you think, going back to the opening discussion, what do you think about referring that back to the non-criminal disposition, which, well, never mind, it doesn't start at a warning. I don't think that's appropriate either. Okay.
Well, I just want to remind you all when we were working on, maybe in the snow and ice bylaw, the Attorney General's office did not like language that is not specific.
Right.
So this idea of not exceeding,
Right.
which is
Right.
what's currently on the
Yeah.
books,
Right.
should be corrected.
Right.
It should be a firm fee, whatever it is, whatever you decide.
I think it should be a firm $100 as opposed to a not to exceed 100 or any amount that we decide for that exact reason that the AG's office doesn't like that kind of language.
Right.
And it's not even clear if you write it and you even go to a non-criminal court with it, they go, well, what
Right.
is it?
Right.
So you're recommending revised to a fine of
Of
$100?
$100.
I have no concern.
So,
And then, oh, go ahead.
yeah, just a quick question. So I will, if we increase this to $100, I will ask them to still point back to non-criminal with this new structure, right?
Sure.
So if we were going to do that, you'd want to have something for first, second, and third, or how does that work within a calendar year?
Well, you don't necessarily need a second or third. I'm not a, not a lawyer, so, but I don't believe that you necessarily need a second or third violation. I mean,
No, I'm sure you don't need
Right,
one, but
right.
then every time somebody's cited, you would get the $100.
right, you can do that.
And
I
they'll
mean,
run
I
into
don't-
other issues anyway
Right,
with RMV and
right,
all that
right.
stuff. so-
I don't have any problem with that,
Yeah,
no,
yeah.
so,
Okay, just wanted to clarify so I knew
Okay.
when I talk with them.
So for
Okay.
these two, it will not point back to that proposed non-criminal disposition penalty. I don't know what you're going to title it, but it's not going to point back to that. It will be a standalone.
yep.
Okay.
Okay,
Especially because we're not going to use the first or second level of that anyway.
Right. Okay.
I wouldn't be opposed to a second and further offense being 300, maxing out.
Right,
But
right,
I don't know if you
right.
want to add that.
I wouldn't be opposed to that either.
Okay. So I guess what we're saying is we do a first offense is 100 and second and subsequent would be 300, would be the max.
Okay.
And then 105-0002.
One, 5, 2, yep.
I was saying the same thing,
Go with the same set.
yeah,
Same thing, okay.
First offense of 100 and
yeah,
second subsequent 3.
yeah.
We also, on that, were suggesting that we delete private schoolhouses. Not that we necessarily have any in town, but sometimes, private schools might hold functions where they do actually allow alcohol, things like that. It's not really a public
Right.
property per se,
Wouldn't they be required to get a permit anyways?
Probably.
From us?
Probably to serve alcohol.
Right.
I think you need at least
Right.
one day, I think.
Right.
Yep.
Yeah, we've issued those a couple
Yeah.
times, yep. But again, you wouldn't want your bylaws fining for it if
Right.
we could also at the same time
Right.
issue a permit. That would be a little contradictory. Okay, I don't have a concern with that.
So you'd be striking private schoolhouse on 105-002.
Right, well,
Yes. Yeah.
actually, as I'm reading that whole So in the opening, you have public building or public property, cemetery, schoolhouse, school grounds, followed by public squares, or in any private schoolhouse and school grounds. I think you can drop the whole thing because you've already covered school grounds in the first one, and it's not school grounds related to a private because we've gotten rid of it, right?
Right. Yeah, it seems duplicitous.
It probably wasn't if private was still there because
Okay.
it was different than public, but now that we've taken that out.
Okay.
So I think it's, oh, and public squares is in there twice.
Yeah.
Yeah, don't know why.
So I'm guessing from the first public squares, it should be or in any private way or parking area, right? You should just drop everything in between.
Okay.
Okay, private way. Okay.
So if I'm following 105-3 is actually allowing us, if we've issued a permit, to supersede 1 and 2. So if we left the schoolhouse in and we issued a permit, it actually would negate that, yeah,
Yeah, I would guess. yeah.
technically. So not that we necessarily need to, but just,
Yeah, yeah.
okay.
Though in -003, they're making the recommendation to strike breach of the peace.
I have no concern.
No concern.
Bill?
I have no.
Again, what they're looking at, I mean, this bylaw was passed some time ago, and what they're saying is that currently the Attorney General's office views breach of peace as unacceptable. And it has actually been, that verbiage has actually been disapproved by in other towns that tried to use it.
Right.
Yeah, no, don't think we have any concerns with striking that part. That's fine. Just to make sure I'm following the 105-4. So, recommendation to pick number 1. So if we've added the penalty provision in Chapter 1, Article 1, then it could be deleted in its entirety. Even though we didn't reference back to it. Because that's the enforcement piece, right?
I'm not sure that you have to reference back to it on every single thing. This might be a question for general code.
There's
I
a-
think,
There's a subsection under sub-bullet 2 that gives you what 105-4 could be replaced with, a simple reference back to that penalty section.
Oh, as opposed to deleting it in full, you could reference it back to the enforcement piece of...
Correct.
Okay,
Yep.
I got you.
Right.
I think that makes more sense only because we're not directing back in full. If we were, I don't think you need it.
Right.
But we're doing different fines imposed, so I just think it may be clearer if we switch to 2. Option 2.
option 2, okay?
Or if you're going to completely go with a different fine structure for specifically Chapter 105, the option presented under sub-bullet 3. And then we put in the $100 for the first offense, 200 for the second, or 300 for the second and subsequent.
I would be okay with that, but then don't we have to change 1 and 2 to not define the
We'd have to probably,
reference and instead
Right.
say a fine per 105.4?
right.
Because I don't think you'd want to define it in 1, 2, and then again in 4 to apply to 1 and 2.
Right. The challenge is that all of these bylaws were standalone, approved at separate town meetings over the history, and
Of
so they
course.
don't speak to each other as comprehensive units, and so you all are sort of making those connections. So we could make those revisions and point them all to subsection 4 of this bylaw, and have that detailed explanation of the enforcement.
What do you think, Bill?
I guess my main question is has the chief looked at any of these
Yes.
enforcement things,
Yep.
issues? Okay, so,
I've got his
Has-
notes
Oh,
on this
okay.
binder right here. I'm reading them
okay.
as I go.
and did he have any questions about 105.4?
All he was saying is that if you elected to do the Chapter 1, Article 1, create the non-criminal disposition section and point back there, that you could strike subsection 4 here and just point it back to that direction. So he was just making that note. I think if you want to keep it standalone like the two of you have discussed, he would do fine with the revisions. I know that when I've discussed this with him, I think he said this to you when we reviewed this last year, as long as it's clear for him and the officers when they are looking to enforce this,
Right,
that's what's
right.
important.
Okay,
When there's some ambiguity as to how to enforce this, that makes it very challenging to administer.
right.
Yeah.
I feel like
So
go ahead.
I was just going to ask what you were looking for in this.
So in 105.4, I guess my question was, how do we want to change it? Do we want to go with 2 or 3? Obviously, I don't think we want to go with 1 because we didn't
Right.
refer completely to that.
Right.
I'm actually leaning towards 3 because I think it's clear. You put enforcement and penalty in the same section together, and then the other 2 can refer to 4 as how it's enforced and what the penalty is,
Yeah.
rather than defining them separately. And since we set the same,
I actually would agree with that. I think 3 is much clearer. It spells it out.
Okay.
So what we would put in there is what we talked about before, $100 for the first one, and then subsequent 300.
Right.
correct, second and beyond, yep. And then in 1 and 2, instead of changing them to those, it would be liable per section 4.
105
Subsection
dash 4.
4, yeah.
Okay.
A game called Beano. That one just made me laugh, I just have to say, when I read that. I don't know that game. But now I'm going to have to go figure out what it was.
I did that too when I looked at it. I said, bingo?
Okay.
was your next one? Or are you going through your notes? Sorry.
Yeah, I don't have anything until 192,001, and that's storage tanks.
What was the number again? I'm sorry.
192-001.
Okay.
It's regarding storage tanks. And it says remove chapter 192 from the code. And my question would be to Brian is have we cleared all of Erving of in-ground storage tanks, or do we know that there are none?
I will have to follow up with the fire chief to see if he's got the current status. There was an effort many decades ago to have all of the underground storage tanks registered with the town clerk's office.
Mm-hmm.
And then the the fire chief would monitor those. And as they were being removed, we would update that record. It's been many years since I've been notified of a tank being removed. I know that we had gotten down to very few, but I would venture to imagine that there's still a few out there, and some that may not have ended up on our registration list, but I can verify with the chief.
Okay.
Yep.
I think also the point that they make, the storage tank bylaw was originally passed in 1991 in Irving, and they're indicating that there is newly revised MGLs that were added in 2009, which basically appear to override most of what's in that bylaw. So.
Well, that was an issue for me because I lived in town when we were revised, and it was early on when we had moved in that we were advised that we had to remove our storage tank or be fined thousands of dollars by the town.
Yeah.
And we said, don't worry, we'll take it out.
So, yeah, they say it specifically states that that the town cannot supersede the, obviously the state requirements.
Right.
So
Right.
they've apparently tightened things up quite a bit.
Okay.
Well, actually, just to
I-
clarify, it,
Go ahead.
it says that the MGL allows the towns to have further regulatory authority over this particular topic matter, so you can, as a town, go farther. But what it's clarifying for us is that when that was adopted, your bylaw, it said that they had to comply by December 31st of 2001.
Right.
And so now that it's been another 20 years, is this still the goal, or do we need to update that section, clarify that? And so I can get some recommended language on how we can make that maybe a little more applicable to today,
Okay.
while I'm getting the update from Chief
Right.
Wonka.
Right.
Okay.
I had just at least one back a little bit further. 121.015.
121.15.
Yep. We have
Dogs.
revised as recommended and revised as follows. I'm assuming we only want revised as follows.
Looking for it.
Gotcha.
121.15, okay. No, I probably forgot when I went through it.
Just probably want to just strike revised as recommended, right?
Yep.
Because those are the updated fee schedules per the
Right,
last vote, right?
right.
17, 12117 while we're there. That's not hugely varied from our newly established nuisance schedule. Do we want that to be slightly different?
121-17?
Correct.
Why do I not have 17 in here? I go from 121-16 to 121-18.
18?
I don't know what 17 is.
Violations and penalties.
I don't know what I did with it.
Anyway, I look for your recommendation, and I usually provide recommendation on those if there's a reason to maintain it differently than Chapter 1.1 now, or not. But if you want to bring that back on the
structure.
it's
Yeah.
generally the same structure. I think there's no initial warning,
Yeah.
and then it goes up to 500 rather than 300 for subsequent. But I don't know if there's a strong preference to leave it that way or just refer it to the other schedule. So I'll just take a look when you have the section in front of you again, if you would, and
Yeah, if I can
let
find
us know
it.
next meeting.
Give you this page, Dick.
I can.
I'm looking at it over. All right. Yeah, I guess I got it here. Okay, so it's on page 39, right?
It is.
Yes.
Okay. So, I guess it's up to you on the fines. Let me take a quick look. The only question I would have would be 121 fines, violations. That might be a little harsh to say that $50 for a fine if somebody doesn't, it gets their dog license late. I think currently it's $25.
So let's see.
It is right here, yes. Section, it says failure to obtain license, $25. I think that might be a pretty significant increase to increase it to $50.
Wait a second.
Dick, are these fines under Chapter 121 for dogs, violations and penalties? Are they in line with our neighbors?
They were when we originally set these up, yes. I can't say that they are definitively now, but they were when we set them up.
Okay.
So I guess my question was, they referenced the MGL, which is seemingly, if I'm reading that, the same as the revised as follows, right? Which is basically what the MGL section
Yeah.
is. And I'm questioning, should we just reference it back to Chapter 1.1 that we just discussed, which is a warning, 50, 100, 300,
That's what I'm thinking we should do.
as opposed to the MGL, adopting the MGL.
Yeah, yeah.
Did you have any concerns?
I have no concern.
Okay. So on 121.17, we'd revise reference to 1.1.
Yep. Yep.
Okay. 142.3. The revisal is to change, to accept the suggested, but then also change town offices to fire department. So that was to file to file with the Erving town offices within 15 days.
Right.
And then it's followed by a copy of the filing should be sent to the fire department.
Right.
So instead, we're going to say you're going to file it with the fire department and then forward a copy to the fire department?
Well, yeah, any person, corporation. Under messages right to no law shall also be filed with the Erving Town Hall. So, I guess what I was thinking is, you know, it gets filed at Town Hall, but certainly that information should be with the fire department in case they ever have a fire there, right? So, I guess you could file directly with the fire chief, but I think the original setup on this was that it just had the words filed with the town, you know, so wasn't sure. I don't know if anything actually is currently filed in the town hall or not, to be honest with you. I mean, I don't have anything in my office, but.
I guess for me, what I'm reading the revised, and I think that would be sufficient. I don't think we'd want to change town offices. Because if we take their revision, it's going to be filed at town offices, and a copy has to be filed with forwarded to the fire department.
Yeah, I get,
So then
you know,
you'd
when I
have
wrote
both.
that in there, I guess what I was thinking is to just have it say, go right directly to the fire department and not necessarily to the town offices as well. I don't know.
I don't
a long
know.
time ago
I
I
don't know
wrote
if
that.
fire chief weighed in, and I don't have a preference, but I think
Yep.
one should point to the other.
Yeah.
I don't know which is first.
Yeah.
Wherever it's filed, a copy should go to the other.
Right.
Yeah.
Is my feeling.
Okay. So if we say to the town hall, what office should it go to?
Well, I see the dilemma, but I ultimately, I believe that the fire department's going to have, or should have, more knowledge about the hazards of the particular material than any particular town office is going to have. And so the fire department at least needs to clear it on some level and see it before it gets accepted. Or we could say it could be filed with a particular office, but that it needed eyes on it by the fire department before it's cleared.
Well, this is an approval. This is the right
Well,
to know. So
right,
it's just a
right.
filing. It's not.
Right.
There's no review process. There's just a notification. It's basically a notification.
Right. I mean, I kind of agree with Bill that it makes sense for it to go directly to the fire department.
I have
And-
no concerns with it going there. Is must be filed with the Erving Fire Department within 15 days. But I do think a copy should be forwarded to town hall, and
Oh, sure.
I would generally say your office, honestly, because I don't know where else it would go.
Yeah,
And
that's
I mean,
fine.
I can picture a period where the EMD is not necessarily the fire chief. Could happen, does happen sometimes.
Mm-hmm.
So having access to that at the town offices as well, I think is
Okay.
good to have a duplicate record. So that's what I would say.
We could structure it in a way like the annual filings for the, what's the license that we issue for the liquid natural gas fueling station? It's escaping me right now, but annually they have to come to your office and make a disclosure about any changes. Copy goes to the fire department, so maybe we can emulate that process.
Sure.
Okay.
Yep. So we'll revise that to include, to file, I think it's best to say town clerk's office and fire chief. And it doesn't matter to me which one gets it first, might be
Well,
more,
maybe it's just and.
yeah.
There's
and.
not a forwarding.
Right,
There's
okay.
a filed with and
Okay, all right.
both, just to be simplistic and
Right.
straightforward. Because I could see the question of who forwarded the copy. Was that the town clerk's job or the fire chief's job,
Right.
or was that the
Right.
the filer's job, if
Okay.
you will.
So we'll revise this.
One 196.2. It's just awful to read.
196?
Yeah, 196-2. I
Yep.
just loop yourself in a loop there.
It is a little grungy, isn't it?
Just, I know it's the recommendation, but if we could make that any simpler. I don't even want to try to read that.
Yeah, I think, I tried to rewrite this a little bit here. I'm not sure if it made it in the box or not. To say something like pursuant to MGL Chapter 82A, Section 2, the Select Board or its designee I guess I don't know where I would pick it up after that. I think I just
yeah.
said shall, or its designee shall, but then it doesn't make sense. Designate the board or office to issue permits, that doesn't make sense. And it kind of goes, like you say, it does go around in a circle.
Yeah, because theirs is pursuant to Mass General Law, Chapter 82A, Section 2, the Board of Selectmen is designated as the means by which the town shall designate the board or officer to issue permits for the purpose of creating a trench, as that term defined MGL Chapter 82.4, 82A4 and CMR. I was in the same vein, pursuant to MGL Chapter 82A, Section 2, the Select Board shall designate the board or officer, the agent or the shall designate. That's the part where I get hung up, but it's just they
Yeah.
shall designate the person, right? So I mean the department to issue the permits. Maybe it's that, the
Do you want me to work on this like we did
Please.
with the curb cut?
please, because I don't like that.
Okay, this is so. I think we would treat this almost similarly to the way that we did driveways and curb cuts,
Yeah,
and it falls.
because
under
we
the highway superintendent.
designated
It's
the highway superintendent,
You
right?
designate, the bylaw says it falls under the highway superintendent, and the appeal process goes up to the select board
Right.
if there's some type of disagreement.
So it
with
doesn't
the
even say
decision.
we'll designate it. It designates it.
I'll
Yeah.
double
It's
check. but that's
defined,
not-
right? It doesn't even say we can. It's defined who it is. We just skipped the whole can designate or will designate.
It empowered the department to oversee the process,
Right.
and then it created an appeal structure if there was a disagreement with the decision that had been rendered.
And we oversee the department, so we've already have that innate, that
Yeah.
inherent authority.
So what I can do is I can take that approach and draft a recommended edit to this. But you're right. I went back to obviously they made an attempt to clarify, and I went back to exactly what was adopted in '08, and it's almost identical to what is still being recommended. So that circular language
Yes, please.
is what was adopted. So maybe what we can do is take an attempt at clarifying what hopefully the intention was in '08, and give it maybe the structure based on what you're doing today, and see if that gets you where you're trying to go. Okay.
Sounds good. We're almost there.
Truthfully, I think what we wrote originally is a lot clearer than what they tried to update it to.
Sometimes
Which wasn't clear anyway.
Floor. Question, Chapter 209, vehicles, heavy commercial, 209, Section 4, number 4. And it's the same problem. Being able sufficient as well, which are considered increasing the $20 fine. Okay, it's listed as a $20 fine for heavy commercial vehicle restrictions.
And so
And it needs to say the fine is $100 as opposed to a fine up to $100.
Right, right.
right.
well, the MGL allows up to 100. Ours is
Right.
20.
Right.
At the
So
time
do
when
we want to increase it to 100?
At the time we
Yes.
adopted
An automatic
it,
yes.
we were told the limit was 20. So I don't know if this is a recent revision, but I think you all agreed at the time that $20 was too low.
It was too low.
Right.
It is too low.
So that was 20904.
20904.
Yeah, so we'll make that the $100 max?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yes. Taking out the up to.
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
Do you mind if I ask you all if we can go back to 209-2?
Okay.
So there were a couple suggested additions to our bylaw. So Chief just noted that when dealing with vehicles in a snowstorm, that the ability to be able to tow as an option is a tool that is useful. So having that clarity may be helpful, as well as the ability to issue a parking ticket if it was necessary.
Which effectively is strike 2092 and instead do 196.9.
I think that's what they're
am I-
suggesting.
That in substance effectively achieves the same, correct?
Tying those things together, right?
Yeah. I think that made sense.
Or to add, to tie the two things together if you use the addition option down below. I guess it's two ways of getting the same thing.
Do you have the revised as follows that we do? The revised as follows here says delete 209-4, which it shouldn't be -4, it should be -2.
Dash
I'm
two.
realizing now. So 209-2 in the revised box, it says delete 209-4. I believe that's meant to say delete 209-2 and move it to subsection D on 196.9.
Got it now, yep.
Which does not make sense. Because subsection D add points back here.
Right.
So I'm wondering if the,
Section 202.
Okay. So ignore the revision. So the three options are to either strike subsection 196-9.
209.
so we're ignoring the revised as follows because that's not, doesn't seem to be correct, right?
Right.
Something got lost in what we were trying to communicate.
Okay.
Or add both of the next two sections. So you'd be updating both suggested bylaws so they point to each other.
209.
So add a new subsection D to 196.9, and then that would point you to Chapter 209, Article 2. And then in this article, the next one is add the following section to Article 2 of the 209 chapter. That would also refer you back to 196.9. So it would tie the two things together.
Am I,
It seems like
am I
referring to.
missing something? Because if I look at 209-2 in the manuscript, it doesn't talk about snow removal at all. Or am I looking in the wrong place? I'm looking at page 83 of the manuscript,
Page 83, yeah.
and that's 209-2 that we're referring to in the editorial, right?
No, that's question 2 for Chapter 209.
Excuse me? Sorry,
Sorry.
I didn't follow it.
That's okay. It's
Oh,
the number of questions
It's-
related to Chapter 209. So you're just on the second question. They could be jumping somewhere else in there. So you want to go to Article 2 of that bylaw. Sorry. Should
I
have been
got
clear
you.
about
Which
that.
is 209-4.
Now
But
it makes
generally,
more
these
sense.
have followed because that's what's throwing me. Generally, the numbers are lining up. So that's
not
supposed to be the
always.
second question on 209, not?
It's the second question the vendor has for you on Chapter 209.
Okay.
Sorry.
So I didn't read the
So if
instructions
you go into
clearly.
Article 2 of Chapter 209,
Which is 209-4, which now makes
now
sense.
it makes sense, yes.
To delete 209-4.
So I'm not understanding why we would delete 2094.
So I think one option. Hang on, I gotta go back to 196 now.
So I think all it's doing is clarifying that in 196-9, in the way that we're managing a snow event and those events, tying it to what is presented in 209 or Article 2 of 209, which is the bylaw that gives the highway superintendent the authority to move vehicles for the plowing purposes. So it's just tying the two things together, because the highway super would likely need that authority and has that authority during a snow event. So it's just trying to tie the two things together.
Yeah.
And I
Seems
think
kind of
that-
odd that there's two different,
Right. Well, 196 was attempting to correct or
Yes.
combine three bylaws over 100 years, and
Right.
it looks like maybe we missed one.
yeah.
So it's just trying to tie the two things together.
I mean, it might not be a bad idea to take 196.9 out of this snow and ice removal thing, which was really looking to do sidewalks and things like that, right, for people. And somehow we put in parking in that as well, and maybe move that to the 209, like they suggest in that first option.
So take all of 196.9 and
Take all
move
of
it to
right,
209.
and, you know, include it in that Article 2.
That's funny. I was thinking the other way around.
Oh, well,
Moving
I
the
guess-
snow vehicle removal during snow operations to 196, which is entirely about snow.
Sure, that would be fine too.
Whereas this only reference to snow is here.
Yep.
And it doesn't reference anything but snow removal.
Yep.
I mean, it's not junk car removal or anything else, so.
Yep. And that's also one of their suggestions, right, is to do that, so.
I didn't see that. That's what threw me, but I thought
Yeah,
that
it
was the
says add a
cleanest
new
one.
subsection D to 196.9, right?
But it points back to 209 too.
Yeah.
That's all
'cause
they're saying is to point back to it
They're
and
just
keep
saying
it
point
there.
back to it, but we can
And-
tell them,
and
yeah,
I'm
just follow it over and
thinking-
renumber it, you know, if you want.
Yeah. I'm thinking we'd move the snow parking enforcement to the snow section, 196. If that makes sense.
That
And
makes
just
sense
take it
to
out of
me,
here
yeah.
completely.
So we'll take the
So the
bylaw.
proposal would be take the language of 209-4 and move it to 196.
So 209, Article 2,
Yeah, 209-4.
and move it to 196.9. And that looks like they're going to suggest it's Part D, but move it there.
Yes.
Yeah, and we're gonna move it in its entirety.
Right.
Yes. And/or does it belong under 10, which is enforcement? But the nuance of where in 196 it goes, because 196.10 is enforcement,
Right.
which may not want to mix them, but they give some enforcement to the highway superintendent,
Right.
technically.
Right.
So either
Okay.
way, whether it's 196.9 or 10, I think we'd want to move that content completely there.
We can work on that.
I'd say we just ask general code if they have any reason why they think it still needs to be in 209. If we're missing something, but I don't think it needs to be in 209 at all.
I agree.
Okay.
Which is exactly what that revised as follows says now that I understand it. It says delete 209-4 and move it to 196.9. Okay. And I mean, that's it, right?
That's
We're
it.
at 62.
Yep.
Yep.
Okay.
So all of the recommended edits
One section done.
you seem okay with?
I had no concerns
Yes.
with any others.
Nope.
Okay.
Okay. Question?
Okay.
Yeah, as a resident, I just want to understand this $100 first offense thing. What type of things are you talking about that is gonna be a $100 offense?
Well, the one that I pulled out particularly was The truck exclusion from Church Street and North Street. That was a $20 fine, which
If
is
you
no.
go out Church Street at the top? Is that what you're talking about?
No, we changed the fines from a proposed $20 fine to a $100 fine.
Specifically the
the-
heavy commercial.
Commercial vehicles.
No, but I'm talking
The-
about, at the beginning of this conversation.
that's
the
a different $100,
Then
yeah.
$300 in every subsequent offense, like what was that talking about?
Okay, so at the very beginning, chapter 1.1 proposed was, we don't have a title for it yet, non-criminal violations.
Which,
So right now,
I-
an idea of what that might be. how-
Not clearing your sidewalk was the one I think that was thrown out in the beginning, right, for snow. And it starts at a warning. It doesn't start at 100, it starts
Okay.
at a warning. Second violation is $50, third is 100, fourth and beyond is 300. So
I
any of
thought
the,
you just said the first was 100 and the second
That's-
was 300.
That was alcohol.
there was different ones. So the general overall one, which was for non-criminal, was first warning, second 50, third 100, fourth 300 and beyond. There are a few specifics where we set 100 as the first offense, and those were
I think they were
public
alcohol ones.
intoxication related type, I believe.
Yep.
Those were two specific ones. They start at 100, second offense is 300 and beyond, always at 300. So those are the ones that started at 100.
Okay.
And then the heavy truck exclusion that has been put in place for North and Church to Gulf Road,
Yeah.
that went from 20 to 100 because MGL now allows 100, but it's just 100. Those
Okay.
are, I believe, the primary ones that we just discussed, having anything other than the tiered, four-tiered structure that was in the beginning.
And when is that gonna all go into, when is the bylaws gonna be finalized and so people are, can be
When-
on
Two
the
parts to
lookout for?
When, when we finalize this, we will bring it all to the voters because
Okay.
effectively, and Brian will give a better answer, but effectively what we're going through is trying to make a much clearer, consolidated, organized code of everything that, all the bylaws and regulations that we've adopted over the years.
Okay,
We are discussing some small changes to them, so those will be called out. But what we're going to do is say, we're asking the voters to repeal everything you've done for all of the time of Erving, and instead adopt this in its place, which is organized and effectively does all the same things except where we've made some changes, such as the fines or those things. And so all of that would be presented and likely as a, we haven't talked yet about how we're going to bring it to the public, but it's going to be obviously a very involved discussion about one article, so I think, or two articles, so it's going to obviously get a lot of focus. So,
And it will be in red line copy, so for anybody who's interested, they can go section by section and see what's been recommended as a change. But to what the chairman's describing, the fine structure, right now, as it exists in every individual bylaw. Some are detailed and others are very nebulous. And so the recommendation from General Code, the vendor on this project, is to do an adoption of an article simply focused on a unified fine structure that generally may be applicable. And every bylaw that feels like it should have a fine structure can point back to this, unless it should have something specific like public intoxication. So if that's something that the voters would find to be helpful, so they understood one fine structure as opposed to every bylaw has something unique, which is what we currently have. What the right structure is for you all to decide, but the goal was to find something organized that people can understand, and we can start pointing all the bylaws to one, as opposed to right now it depends on the moment. It depends on what the law said at the time, like $20 for heavy vehicle, and now it's up to 100. We wouldn't know that unless we went through this review process. So,
okay. Thank you.
you're welcome. And a fair number say up to, so it's, what does that mean?
right.
Right.
And the AG
Which
does
we're getting
not-
called out on. It's just,
Yeah.
it's not upheld in court these days.
Right. It
say
implies
up to.
discretion, and there should be no discretion in the fine structure. It should be very clear. So,
Yeah, and I'd just like to add that what we're doing is we're not doing it because we're just looking to change change laws or increase fines, but a lot of our bylaws are not even up to date with state rules and regulations and the changes that have been made over the years. And this is the process that we have to go through in order to fix all of those changes and revamp it and make it so that an officer or town administration can legally do the things that we're asking people to vote on.
Yeah, and we reviewed 62 pages of their editorial review of the recommended code changes. We didn't discuss every one of them here. A lot of them are just, update this wording because MGL's changed to this, change Board of Selectmen to Select Boards. Small stuff like that not so material. But the entirety of all the changes that we have recommended, planning board changes, all of the entire code will come out in that for the voters to review and understand what is changing. I'm sure we'll do some informational sessions ahead of time to, field questions and stuff. So it's been a lot of work going on already with Dick and others. Now we're doing work, but we're far from the final step. So good on code for tonight, sir?
Yep, I think so. I was ready to change the topic just briefly, is if you would be so kind as to sign the warrant for the primary tonight. I could,
Do we have
if you
that?
could do that next, I could meander on.
We do. It's at the very last item of the agenda. But we'll jump to it. That's fine. Issuance of the 2022 state primary election warrant for September 6th, 2022.
So Dick, I assume there's a second phase of this, what we just finished?
Yeah, I should have said that. So next meeting
yes.
on the 15th, we'll be reviewing the next third that we discussed, which was
Okay.
pages, I don't recall.
I don't either. It's after the zoning.
Yeah, 1 second.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's going to start on page 98.
98 to 146.
98 to 146.
Yep.
Okay.
And actually, that is the last section of editorial, and then
Yep.
the following meeting will be just to review any open items that we have left, and hopefully check on what we want
Okay.
to see changed.
And I'm going to bring you recommendations on cemetery commission, trench permits, underground storage tanks.
45.499 and 196.2, and storage tanks.
Right, yep.
Okay, back to the warrant. Make a motion we approve the warrant for the 2022 state primary on Tuesday, 6th day of September, 2022.
Second.
Any discussion?
No.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
I will note, just in the for what it's worth category, that I currently have almost 100 mail-in applications for voting, which is a significant increase over just a normal primary day where, we'd be lucky if we hit 100. Usually on a state primary, when it's not a presidential, we'd be hard pressed to get more than 75 people out, according to the past statistics.
I think that's it all related to the, to any kind of enhanced state effort to make it
Yep.
known and available.
Yep,
I think it's correlated.
yep.
Well, my opinion, if convenience
Yes.
increases participation, I'm all for it.
Yep.
There you are,
Thank
sir.
you.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Did you want to put your signature on it?
Oh, yep.
Next item was discussion regarding textile waistband and disposal options. We'll pass over that.
Thank you, sir.
Following meeting minutes of July 18th, 2022.
Make a motion to accept meeting minutes of July 18th, 2022 as written.
All second.
I have no concerns.
Same. All those in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. Thank you, sir.
Pass over minutes of June 21st, 2021. I'm sorry, pardon me. 2022. Sorry. Review of the Poplar Mountain Conservation Area parking lot construction procurement. Brian provided the procurement summary. And at the end, we received only 2 responses.
Correct.
And the lowest responsible bidder was Johnson Asphalt Paving LLC, 75 Main Street, Northfield, Mass, in an amount of $35,514.50. So I'll make a motion to award the procurement for the construction of the Poplar Mountain Conservation Area parking lot to Johnson Asphalt Paving LLC of Northfield, Massachusetts in the amount of $35,514.50 and authorize Brian Smith, Town Administrator, to execute all necessary agreements.
Second.
Any concerns?
None.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Thank you, gentlemen. We'll get that going tomorrow. We're almost there.
Thank you. Progress. Yeah, it's exciting. Next item is review of the Erving Community PEG Access Professional Services procurement. For this one, we issued an IFB. And we received a single response from Bernardston Northfield Community TV, Inc., who happens to be with us tonight. Thank you. Behind the scenes. This was a 3, so your memo has a typo, right? That's year 1, year 2, year 3, not year 1, year 2, year 1?
Yes.
That was me moving too
clarify.
quickly. Yes, that is correct.
So year 1 of 14,000, year 2 of 14,500, year 3 of 15,000 for a total contract of $43,500.
Correct.
And being the only,
I'll read it.
okay, thank you.
Make a motion to award the procurement for community access TV professional services to Bernardston Northfield Community TV, Inc. of Northfield, Mass. For a term of 3 years, beginning September 1st, 2022, ending August 31st, 2025, for a total contract price of $43,500, and to authorize Brian Smith, Town Administrator, to execute all necessary agreements.
I will second. No discussion?
Done?
All those in favor?
Aye.
Thank you.
We have a letter of interest for the Cultural Council from Kathleen Sadler. We currently have 4 vacant seats.
Make a motion to appoint Kathleen Sadler as a member of the Cultural Council with a term ending June 30th, 2025.
I will second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you.
Review of the cemetery feasibility study scope of work draft. This was in the additional sent,
Right.
correct?
And this is just the first draft to run past the two of you and to get your feedback and see what changes you want or what additional research you want done before this goes out.
Did you get a chance to review it, Bill?
I did.
Okay.
And I was in favor of the increase of to 520. Per 1,000 gallons of,
Oh, no, I'm sorry. This is the cemetery feasibility, not
I'm
the
sorry.
rates. Yeah.
oh, I have it here somewhere.
What's that?
That I have it here somewhere. I just saw it.
Can we go print off a copy?
Cultural council. I might need one.
I don't need to print on that.
I know
I
have it.
need some time to review it, so unless you had something to add or changes that you already knew you wanted, I don't have anything to add on that one.
Oh, okay.
I don't know if you did. Not for this meeting. I don't.
I know I reviewed it, but
Just for the high level, the procurement can be done using an engineering or architectural service,
right.
which does not require a competitive bid.
Right.
With that understanding, we haven't done this in a century. And so I would venture to guess that it would make sense for us to do the best we can to really define a scope of work that you think makes sense for this project and submit it to several firms that customarily do this type of work, solicit those proposals back to you, and allow you to review each of those proposals and see which firm offers the service that you think best matches this project. We can structure this in any way that makes sense to you. I don't know that an IFB is the best way, but if you'd like it structured in something more competitive like that, we could do that. So as you're reflecting on that procurement process, let me know how you're feeling about that. And then just to let you know, the 3 parcels that we identified are parcels that the town owns currently. One is on the other side of the town on Mountain Road. The other 2 are pieces of property that you own on the backside through the woods off of here. Challenges with that include access. So we'd have to devise access if we were to use those.
So they're beyond the extended care drive meets and bounds that we did recently.
On the other side of the railroad tracks,
Right.
correct.
They're beyond that. Yep.
So we'd either have to continue Care Drive over the railroad tracks to get there, or we'd have to come from the police department property, come through the woods to access. We want to explore town property that you currently own that could serve potentially for this purpose and explore that before we consider the potential for having to buy property. But the procurement was drafted with, if these pieces of property do not meet the needs that you would have to have for a cemetery, please advise on what characteristics you would need in a parcel that we could procure in the future. So, happy to research anything else that the 3 of you need.
The parcels back here, the 137 is accessible from our property directly behind the police department, correct?
Oh.
Is 1316 as well?
So, if you're looking at that map, you'll see a 71 in the lower corner. That's 71 French King Highway. Lower left-hand corner. So that's the police department parcel. So we'd have to gain access through that adjacent parcel to get back there.
So
I believe
there
it's
is
all
there is
property-
private property in between.
Correct.
Got it.
So these are all parcels that were acquired by the citizens during the Grand Trunk purchase. So.
We can procure this under engineering services, and even if we're not using an IFB, if we go out to multiple firms, we can get, I mean, that can be competitive to a point. Not in the same way, but
Right.
still. Okay.
And maybe the areas to focus on are quality assurances, number of similar projects, municipal references that they can provide you. We could try to tailor it specifically to working with communities approximately our size. We can tailor that qualification section however you think it would best derive a firm that would meet your needs.
I don't have anything to add other than just to say, did we find or have we looked to see if any communities, I guess I won't even say surrounding, just communities in Massachusetts that have done this recently that have some language that we can potentially reuse, or did you already?
I just checked a few times. I think we found one example maybe in the state.
Yeah, I think Salem had recently done this. We wrote this so long ago. I think we pulled language from that, but I can go back and double check.
Okay, just confirm that. That's all I got right now, but I'll send you more feedback as I read through it again if they have any questions.
Right.
Bill, anything for now on that one, or good
Nope.
for now?
No.
Okay.
Question, where's the Mountain Road property?
It's located, doesn't have an address, but it's located at the top section. You own about 30 acres. It was purchased in the 70s, I believe. It's a fairly flat parcel. I think it's been maybe logged once. These are just exploratory, just to see if any of these parcels have some viability for it.
Next item, review of permitting and licensing software procurement draft.
And that was just a start.
Did you say first line?
This was the licensing and permitting software draft, procurement draft.
That also came under that separate email.
I might have missed it.
That's okay. We were trying to get it to the three of you just to begin the conversation. So this is the long identified need to take the existing databases that we have,
Oh, yeah.
migrate them to the cloud, and look at some of the inefficiencies that we're experiencing in the office, but also ways that maybe we can further utilize the town website to allow our citizens and businesses to do more online. So the procurement is drafted with that in mind, this idea of taking what we have today, building upon it, improving it, and trying to make it cloud hosted and accessible to the residents so that they can maybe apply online, track the progress of their applications, and maintain that history. That would be done under Chapter 30B. So we do have to follow either a request for quotes process or an IFB process.
I obviously provided some input. I don't have anything to add right now, so we'll bring it back next meeting for further review. Discussion regarding conceptual proposal for shared use path connecting Erving Center and Farley. Mariah, would you like to join us?
Hi.
Hi. So you'd asked us about this maybe last meeting, in a recent meeting. So you were going to do some background and let us know what you found.
Yeah. So I started to research a shared use path on the Wendell side of the Millers River that has been talked about. It looks like at least for the last 15 years, if not, well, at least 20, because it was mentioned in the master plan in 2002. And possibly even before that, in different iterations. And so I am asking right now just to get approval to keep researching this and to keep talking with stakeholders. There's some grant opportunities that I think we could potentially apply to in the future. And so basically the research that I've done so far, I've found listed in half a dozen or so strategic plans of ours or for COGS or MassDOT that there has been a shared use trail mentioned or proposed on the south side of the Millers River, connecting Farley and Erving Center. In one plan, it had mentioned also connecting it all the way down to underneath the French King Bridge. I don't totally understand where they pictured that happening, but the language was a little bit unclear. But they talked about having a shared use path. They mentioned Wendell, so I assumed it was over there, but they also talked about on the other side of town. And one of, I think it was our master plan, actually even mentioned collaborating with the Conservation Commission in Wendell to begin that discussion. On the memo, I included an excerpt from the map of the Wendell State Forest, which currently has a trail listed there, at least for part of the proposed or conceptual trail. Unclear where that actually comes out on. Jackie has helped me start digging through land deeds to take a look at what easements are there. But it's complicated. I haven't figured that out yet. But so I'm wondering if there's already an easement that DCR has through a property there that we just don't know about, because they do have this trail on their formal map that they're giving to people. They list it as an unpaved road and a hiking, skiing, and snowmobile trail. And it doesn't connect all the way, well, it does, it connects all the way to Erving Center, and it shows it a little bit past that. My hope would be, my big hope would be that we could find funding to do a feasibility study on a trail that would connect from Farley all the way to Wendell Depot and Orange. I think the ideal situation would be the kind of a phase 1, phase 2 approach, where phase 1 would connect Farley and Erving Center, and maybe a phase 2 would connect to Wendell Depot. But I actually happened to have a conversation with the community development director in Orange, and they're working on a very similar project, but connecting with Athol. So they think that conceptually this kind of project has a lot of synergy with the stuff that they're already talking about in town, and that it would be great to have a regional bike trail, or at least connections for cyclists, where someone could safely get from, say, Athol to Montague, on the bike, which would be pretty great. You can't do that right now.
Not safely.
Not safely, for sure.
People do it, but
You can try. I don't recommend it. So there's a whole bunch of stakeholders that I've listed here, various boards and commissions in our town, in Wendell and Orange, National Grid, DCR, MassDOT for COG, private landowners, and Friends of the Millers River, or any other kind of environmental organizations or other organizations that may want to be involved from the community. I wanted to bring this all to you to find out if you support me moving forward with this, and then my hope is that if you say yes, to have a conversation with the Wendell Select Board and potentially their open space committee. I don't know if they've finished it yet, but the last time I spoke with someone at FERCOG, Wendell was in the process of rewriting their open space plan. And so this was kind of a pertinent discussion. And so I believe that the open space committee is actually pretty active, or at least they have been in the recent year or two. And then also just kind of more formally talking with Orange and saying this is something that we're considering. Mass Trails is a potential grant funding opportunity that they fund things like this, both feasibility studies and the actual construction. They prioritize projects that connect multiple towns or regions. So this would actually be, I think, a competitive project for some of their grants. But everyone would have to be on board. And I recognize that the actual trail most of it wouldn't actually be in town, in our town, but I think that it would serve our residents very well, and it would serve a greater regional purpose. And the connections would be to Riverfront Park in Erving, and then on the Wendell side of Farley. I don't know, obviously, without having done a whole feasibility study, where exactly those other connections could take place, but that's what that feasibility study would try to find out.
I think it's a good project, and I certainly think you should continue. The Erving Center Park, since its improvement, has certainly brought a lot of people into the park, from as far as Orange and other places, and I think everyone's looking for more expansion and being able to go further than what they do in that area currently. So I think it'll be very much welcomed by even the other towns as well. So
Thank you.
I concur, and I'm fascinated by the Wendell State Forest map that shows it already there as an unpaved road all the way. I don't think it's quite that anymore, but I don't know how much you've done on that map research around that so far, but the paved road that is shown between Route 2 and the unpaved.
Which are you
I'm
looking at Google
your
Maps?
your little excerpt of the map that you put in the memo.
Yep. I'm sorry, what are you looking at?
The paved road section that's going south off of Route 2, about in the middle, connecting to the unpaved.
Oh, I assume that's Riverfront Park. That's the bridge, I think.
And well, I'm assuming North Street's the northbound on the other side. That's a lot more west of the crossing. I'm just.
This map is not
really
super
odd
accurate.
looking. Because if that's the case, it's like past the paper mill somewhere. So yeah, I don't know. It just looked funny, but it's probably
Yeah,
just
I
not
think
quite
that the scale on this
accurate.
might be a little funky.
It's kind of just trying to figure out where that was. Yeah, no, I completely agree. I think it's a good thing to pursue and see where we go with.
Okay.
As you come upon things and need our support or have questions about what's next, let's continue to talk about it.
Sure. I think it may come up as we talk about the Bridge Street improvements that Glenn's been working on, as we work with MassDOT on some of our road and pedestrian and cycling access improvement projects. Hopefully, if we're going to do all these projects, they can all connect in a way that makes sense. So I think that now is a pertinent time to at least start these conversations and get them on people's minds.
I agree. Before we have a bike lane that stops and starts and doesn't go anywhere
Yeah, not
in
ideal.
that area. Question?
Just a comment, as someone who lives in Farley and has a mother who lives in Erving Center and who really enjoys walking, I will say, when my kids were little, I did walk from Erving Center to Farley that way. And I figured out how to do it back then. It took a while, but it was a nice walk. So I think it would be awesome. I would love to have something like that connecting.
Thank you.
I've heard rumor that you still can, but I haven't done it myself, and I'm guessing it would take a little figuring. So if we can make it a little more easy for the beginner, I think that'd be a good thing. Yes, sir.
As someone who has both walked on sections of that and knows some of the people over there, two of the residents, one on the east end and one on the west end, they put in a number of trails and they made some improvements and actually repaired the bridge that used to go across the stream there, a fairly substantial one, as I remember. They built off the existing abutments and put a bridge in, and people go on that on horseback as of last week. One of the residents told me, gave me a description of hiking all the way through and coming around and coming back and how big a loop it was. So it's something that has been used and is still there to some extent.
Yeah, I definitely hope we wouldn't be starting from scratch, but there's definitely some areas that probably need some improvement to get to where we'd like it to be.
Yes. National Grid does have sections of it that are cleared for the easement that they have. So yeah, definitely not starting from scratch, but I think it'll be probably the first time in many years that all these stakeholders have all come together to talk about it. So it might be a new conversation for most of these people.
Definitely a good one to start, I think. So
I agree.
I'm all for it.
All right,
Very good.
thank you.
Thank you. We have some first reads on policies. So review of the criminal and sex offender record information policy, the drug and alcohol free workplace policy, retirement policy, COBRA policy, HIPAA policy, and the non-discrimination policy. So I don't have any comments for first read, do you?
I have no concerns on the first reading.
Okay. Figured I'd combine them all. Their first read. We'll dive into them a little more next meeting. If there's questions or concerns. Review and recommendation and set FY23 water use rates. This is the one you were commenting on earlier,
It
I believe,
was.
or started to.
I was a little ahead of myself there.
It's all good. Current water rate is $5.20 per thousand.
Yep. And looking to, so I indicated that I was in favor of the increase to 525, I believe it is. 520, no, proposed water rate of 520.
525.
525, yeah,
Yep.
per
yep,
1,000.
You're right. Yep.
Yep. For future capital improvements and development of the department as a whole.
Yeah, I think we had, hopefully knock on wood, our first major issue with the system in terms of a break or some sort of problem this last year. So it's probably good to be thinking about being prepared for that in the future. And hopefully those don't come soon, but we know there'll be some.
The age of that particular section is one of the original sections. We know that, I think about 3 years ago, we had a neighborhood that was built in the 90s that had maybe a batch of pipe that had some soft components to it that had leaks. So I think you have an age throughout the system where we're going to start to see a few more breaks, and we need to be ready to respond accordingly.
I'll make a motion that we set the water rate for FY23 at $5.25 per thousand gallons.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you, gentlemen.
Review recommendation and set FY23 electric vehicle charger use rate. Recommendation between the current electricity rates, admin fee, and parking fee, which is not recommended, is 35 cents per kilowatt. What is it currently?
30.
30.
Yep. So a 5-cent increase.
Has our use been significant yet? I mean, probably year over year it might be, but
It had
in
been
general?
increasing. We need to run the most recent reports. There had been a bit of a reduction. Not sure exactly what that correlates to. I'll be honest, one of our most heavily used ones is the one next door at the library. And that may just be because people will come and actually spend some time conducting activities or reading at the library, whereas downtown they're coming in, they're doing short charges, maybe purchasing something at one of the stores, and after a 20-minute charge will leave. So we definitely saw more variety in the number of users over on the West Main Street lot, whereas this was fewer unique users, longer durations.
Got it. Does that 5 cent change reflect an increase in both the actual electric rate and the admin fee, or is it just an increase in the electric rate?
Just the electric rate. Obviously, more users and higher use would help share the costs on the admin, which is predominantly the licensing. There's a slight service fee that ChargePoint charges for conveying the data related to the charge and monitoring that system.
Did we cover that last year, or do we need to run that too?
You covered it last year. We made the investment. I think we did a 3-year license for the 4 stations.
Okay. I don't know, it sounds high to me, but I don't, at least yet have an EV, so I'm not out there trying to buy it, so I don't know how competitive it is without looking at a map and.
When we did last year, when we had set it at 30 cents, I think there were a few communities along Route 2 that were a little bit higher than us, but most of our peers were around 30. So I think we felt comfortable moving it there. Just strictly looking at the increase in the electrical usage at this time, at the per kilowatt fees, I do think it's the appropriate thing to adjust. And that we can always, if the costs come back down per kilowatt, we can always bring that back to you and reduce the rate. We try to keep this in the revolving account as a cost center, so.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, we want it self-funded, I mean.
That's the goal.
Right.
Right.
Correct.
Any concerns?
I have no concerns.
Make a motion, we'll set the FY23 EV charging rate at 35 cents per kilowatt hour.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you.
Discussion regarding sharing legal service fees with neighboring towns and the FERCog for FERC license review for First Light relicensing of the Northfield Mountain Pump Station and Cabot Station.
Sorry, that was a long one.
And lots of acronyms I chose not to expand upon, but if there's questions. So Gil, Northfield, and Montague so far have showed support for having shared legal services for reviewing the First Light agreements related to the FERC relicensing. So the question is, do we want to as well? If we're participating, the approximate cost would be $2,500 toward that. And we have sufficient funds in the council line, so. Seems like a small fee for some assistance. I don't know if you have any.
Yeah, I have a little concern. Has the assessors weighed in on any of this?
In terms of the recreation plan, when that came through and you all were working on the agreement in principle, yes, we brought that to the Board of Assessors, specifically because there were action items within the recreation plan that talked about permanently conserving or putting a restrictive easement of some sort for trails and things of that nature. And there were no concerns from the assessors on those items. What this is building to is the anticipated filing of an umbrella agreement of all the different stakeholders. Some communities are focused on whitewater rafting, which wasn't of particular concern to Erving, and other items. So when they bring all of these agreements in principle together under one umbrella and submit that to FERC as an example of all of these negotiations over all these years, in its entirety, the pieces talk to each other. And I think once it gets to that level, that's probably beyond any of our expertise. And it's probably not a bad suggestion that we have somebody who's familiar not only with the environmental concerns of the river, but with a process like this to assist. And if each of our neighbors share that concern, it probably makes sense for us to do it together. So I think the concept makes sense, but I don't think that, maybe to the point you were making, that negates the need to make sure that the assessors are included in those conversations and their concerns are also looked at.
All right, I'm more concerned with the legality down the road.
Yeah.
Because often when you read the newspaper and people talk about some of those issues and concerns, they're not the issues and concerns of Erving, they're the issues and concerns of other communities and different thoughts and views and ideas that I'm not necessarily against, but,
Right.
but I feel we have to be careful and protect ourselves as well.
course.
So.
No, correct me if I'm wrong, but primarily this part of it and the reference here and the relicensing settlement is around recreation and impact, right? Like, there's a fair amount of references to erosion control and those sorts of things, as opposed to necessarily,
Predominantly.
necessarily
Right.
tax-based implications. I mean, there's some
Yeah,
probably,
right.
but I think to your point, if I'm correct, even if we do this and it gives us some shared cost legal opinions on some of it, if there's additional concern or value or interest between the assessors and ourselves to get a further opinion or position ourselves differently, I think we can always
Right.
hire our own or leverage our own legal services
Right.
in addition. This
I
is
agree.
just a,
Right.
I looked at this as just a low cost starting point to give some initial advice, and if we want to dive deeper on something, I think we still have that. Doesn't limit our ability, right? So,
I agree. I think we should be at the table.
Okay.
what acronym city? What is CRC that they're already representing?
Connecticut River Conservancy,
Okay.
I believe.
It's the
They're
river
the
one.
lead environmental
The
agency
Connecticut
for
River, yeah,
the Connecticut
okay.
River.
Yeah, and this is not the attorneys that we have used historically with the Mountain Project and shared with Northfield and others, right?
Correct.
It's a different firm.
Correct.
Yeah.
So I'll make a motion to appropriate $2,500 for shared legal services for the review of First Light settlement agreements in the FERC relicensing process with Franklin Regional Council of Governments in the towns of Gill, Northfield, and Montague.
I will second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you.
One other piece of unexpected business we were planning to handle later this week, but that meeting is not happening. So it was a review of the patrol officer screening committee appointments and adjusting that potentially. One of the current screening members is going to be unavailable for some period of time, and one of the other members is no longer with the town of Erving, so we're down a couple members. And I believe Chief was recommending potentially going down to a three-member group if we were interested in doing that. And I don't have that note in front of me. What was the recommendation for the screening committee?
It's with my stuff getting ready for the other meeting that
I know.
wasn't today.
It was
Up
Chief
to the
Hulse,
chief. I believe.
Superintendent McCrory,
I think he was serving on the committee.
and a
a
member
select
from the board.
Yep.
Yeah, I've been on it for some time and would like to continue. So.
Any concerns with making that change of membership?
No?
I don't know what the makeup is, so I guess I'll make a motion that we dissolve the police officer screening committee as currently established and establish a new patrol officer screening committee consisting of 3 members. Member from the board, William Bembry, Chief Holst, and Superintendent McCrory. I don't need anything else on that, do I?
Second.
Okay.
Thank you.
Any further discussion?
I'd probably just add that and when available, I would like to see that increase the
The membership
The
back up
membership,
to 5?
yes.
Yeah,
Yes.
makes sense.
And some civilian members to that
Right.
process as
Absolutely.
well.
We can simultaneously put out, word for it. We can work on that, if that makes sense, to expand that to 5 and look for
Right.
public interest.
Okay.
And then come back to it and always expand
Yeah.
it when we have it.
Yeah.
Okay, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. And with that, Brian, Bill, make sure I didn't skip something. I have a habit of doing that lately.
Nope, you got it all.
All right. Any other business, Bill?
I have nothing.
Brian?
No, sir.
Okay. With that, make a motion to adjourn at 8:51 p.m.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Thank you all. Have a good evening.